The church bells echoed through the dusty streets of Rock Springs, Wyoming territory, on that sweltering August morning in 1878. But the joyous sound mocked Rebecca Catherine's heart as she stood alone at the altar in her ivory lace dress, watching the townspeople whisper and stare while the man she had pledged to marry rode out of town with her cousin just an hour before the ceremony. The reverend cleared his throat awkwardly, his Bible still open to the marriage passage he would never read. Rebecca's hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet of wildflowers her mother had picked that dawn. The ribbon around the stems suddenly felt too tight in her grip. She could feel every eye in the small wooden church boring into her back, could hear the rustling of skirts as women leaned close to their neighbors to spread the scandal further. "Miss Catherine, perhaps we should," the reverend began, but his words fell away like ash on the wind. Rebecca's mother sat in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, her face red with shame and sorrow. Her father stood rigid beside her, his weathered hands clenched into fists. They had traveled all the way from their ranch, 10 miles outside town for this moment, had saved for months to afford the dress Rebecca wore, had invited everyone they knew to witness what should have been the happiest day of their daughter's life. But Thomas Whitfield had made his choice, and it had not been her. The letter had arrived at dawn, delivered by a guilt-ridden ranch hand who could barely meet her eyes. Thomas's handwriting was rushed, the words cutting. "I cannot marry a woman I do not love. Your cousin Eleanor understands me in ways you never could. We have left for California. Do not try to follow. Forgive me if you can." Rebecca had read those words 3 times before their meaning truly sank in. Eleanor. Sweet, beautiful Eleanor who had arrived 2 months ago to visit, who had smiled so kindly at Rebecca while stealing her intended right from under her nose. The betrayal burned worse than any branding iron. Standing at the altar now, Rebecca felt something inside her crack. Not her heart that had already shattered in the early morning light when she read Thomas's coward's confession. No, this was something deeper. Her pride, perhaps. Her faith in the future she had imagined so clearly. She turned slowly to face the congregation. 73 people had gathered to see her wed. 73 witnesses to her humiliation. The Johnsons sat in the 3rd row, their 3 daughters whispering behind their hands. Sheriff Porter stood near the back, his hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. The Morrison family, the Baileys, the Cooks, the Andersons, everyone she had known her entire life now stared at her with pity or poorly concealed glee at having fresh gossip to sustain them through the winter months ahead. Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, though she had no idea what words might come. An apology, an explanation. Should she cry? Should she run? But before she could make a sound, the church doors swung open with a loud creak, flooding the dim interior with harsh sunlight. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, dust settling around his boots. "Begging your pardon," a deep voice drawled, "but it seems a shame to let such a beautiful bride go to waste." The congregation gasped in unison. Rebecca's eyes struggled to adjust to the light, to make out the features of this stranger who had interrupted her moment of deepest shame. He stepped forward, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. His face was sun-weathered and handsome in a rugged way, with gray eyes that held something fierce and gentle all at once. He wore the typical garb of a traveling cowboy, worn denim trousers, a dusty shirt, a leather vest, and spurs that jingled with each step. "Who in blazes are you?" Rebecca's father demanded, rising from the pew. The stranger's gaze never left Rebecca's face. "Name's Isaac Jameson, sir. I rode into town about an hour ago, stopped at the saloon for water for my horse. Heard tell of a wedding. Also heard tell of a groom who ran off like the yellow belly he is. He took another step closer. Seemed to me like maybe the lady at the altar might need someone to stand beside her, stop all this gossip before it gets worse. That is highly irregular, the Reverend sputtered. So is leaving a woman at the altar, Isaac countered. His eyes finally moved from Rebecca to scan the room. Seems to me everyone here came expecting a wedding. The food's already prepared for the reception, isn't it? The musicians are waiting. Seems a waste to send everyone home disappointed. Rebecca found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. You don't know me. Why would you offer such a thing? Isaac stepped closer still until he stood at the base of the altar steps. Up close, she could see the road dust on his clothes, the stubble on his jaw, the calluses on his hands. This was a man who worked hard, who lived rough, but his eyes were kind. You're right, miss. I don't know you, but I know that look in your eyes. I know what it's like to be left behind, to face the stares and whispers. I know what it's like to need someone to stand beside you when the whole world seems set on watching you fall. He held out his hand. I'm offering you a choice. You can walk out of here alone. Let these people talk about you for years to come. Let this day define you as the girl who got jilted. Or you can take my hand, and we can give them something else to talk about. This is madness, Rebecca's mother whispered, but there was a note of hope in her voice. Rebecca stared at Isaac's outstretched hand. Every logical part of her mind screamed that this was insane, that she could not possibly marry a complete stranger, that this would solve nothing. But another part of her, the part that had stood here dying inside while the town watched, that part saw an escape route. A way to salvage something from this disaster. A way to stop being a victim. You understand what you're offering? She asked quietly. Marriage is not something to enter lightly. No, madam, it isn't, Isaac agreed. But neither is leaving a woman to face this alone. I'm not saying we have to stay married forever. I'm saying we get married today, we give you back your dignity, and then we figure out the rest as we go. If you want an annulment in a few months, we can arrange it. But at least you won't be the jilted bride. You'll be the woman who married a stranger, which is a much more interesting story. A strange laugh bubbled up from Rebecca's chest. It felt good, that laugh, like a pressure valve releasing. He was right, in a way. The story of Rebecca Catherine marrying a mysterious stranger who rode into town on her wedding day was far more romantic than the story of Rebecca Catherine being abandoned for her prettier cousin. If you're going to do this, do it now, Sheriff Porter called from the back. Before everyone comes to their senses. Rebecca looked at her parents. Her father's face was storm dark, but her mother gave the smallest nod. Take the chance, that nod said. Save yourself. She descended the 3 steps from the altar platform. Her wedding dress rustled around her ankles, the hem already dusty from the dry summer. Isaac's hand remained extended, steady as stone. When she placed her fingers in his palm, his hand closed around hers warm, calloused, real. I'm Rebecca Catherine, she said. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Rebecca, Isaac replied, and there was something in his voice that made her believe he truly meant it. Together, they turned to face the Reverend, who looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. Reverend, if you would be so kind, Isaac prompted. This is most unusual, the Reverend repeated, but he looked down at his Bible. The marriage ceremony was already prepared. The words were the same whether the groom was Thomas Whitfield or Isaac Jameson. The Reverend began to read, his voice gaining strength as he progressed through the familiar passages. Rebecca barely heard the words. Her mind was spinning, trying to comprehend what she had just agreed to. She was about to marry a stranger. A man whose last name she had only just learned, whose face she had never seen before today, whose past was a complete mystery. What kind of man rode into a town and offered to marry a jilted bride? Was he kind or calculating, running from something or running toward it? The questions piled up in her mind, but she pushed them aside. She had made her choice and she would see it through. "Do you, Isaac Jameson, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the Reverend asked. "I do," Isaac said, his voice clear and firm. "And do you, Rebecca Catherine, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Rebecca looked up at Isaac. He was nearly a head taller than her, built strong from years of hard work. His gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw something she had never quite seen in Thomas's gaze: genuine presence. Isaac was completely here in this moment with her, not distracted, not distant, but fully committed to this wild decision. "I do," she said. The Reverend cleared his throat. "By the power vested in me by the Wyoming territory and the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The church went utterly silent. This was the moment that would make it real, that would seal this strange bargain between two strangers. Isaac's hand came up to cup Rebecca's cheek, gentle despite the roughness of his palm. "May I?" he asked quietly, for her ears only. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was a soft kiss, respectful and brief, but Rebecca felt it down to her toes. It was so different from Thomas's kisses, which had always been rushed and slightly wet. This was deliberate, careful, like Isaac was trying to tell her something without words. "I will not hurt you." When they pulled apart, the congregation erupted in confused applause. Some people clapped out of habit, some out of shock, some because they genuinely did not know what else to do. Isaac turned to face the crowd, Rebecca's hand still in his. "Thank you all for coming to witness our union," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We hope you'll join us at the reception." Rebecca's mother was crying again, but these tears looked different, relieved perhaps, or simply overwhelmed. Her father stood and approached them, his expression unreadable. "Son," he said to Isaac, "we need to have a conversation." "Yes, sir, I expect we do," Isaac agreed. "But perhaps after we get through the reception. Your daughter has been through enough stress for one morning." Her father studied Isaac for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. After the reception, the next few hours passed in a blur. The townspeople migrated to the community hall, where tables had been set up with food: roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, pies, and cakes that the local women had spent days preparing. The musicians tuned their instruments. Children ran around the edges of the room, excited by the unexpected drama. Rebecca moved through it all like she was walking through water, everything slow and strange. Women she had known her whole life approached her with congratulations that sounded more like questions. "How wonderful that you found someone so quickly. What a romantic story. Where did you say you met your husband?" To each question, Rebecca smiled and gave vague answers. "It all happened so fast. Isaac is a good man. Sometimes you just know." Isaac stayed beside her through all of it, his hand at the small of her back, a steady presence. He made conversation with the men, answering their probing questions about his work and his past with an easy confidence that Rebecca envied. "I've been working ranches from Montana down to Colorado," he told Sheriff Porter. "Moving cattle, breaking horses, whatever work needs doing. Saved up a fair amount. Was thinking about settling down, finding a place to call home. Seems Rock Springs might be that place." "What made you ride into town today of all days?" Mrs. Johnson asked, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Fate, madam," Isaac replied with a smile. "Or maybe just good timing. Either way, I'm grateful for it." When it came time for the first dance, Isaac led Rebecca onto the floor. The musicians struck up a waltz and he placed his hand at her waist, taking her hand in his. "I should tell you, I'm not much of a dancer, he admitted as they began to move. I should tell you, I'm not much of a wife to a stranger, Rebecca replied. Isaac laughed, a genuine sound that made something in Rebecca's chest loosen. I suppose we're both learning as we go then. They swayed together, finding a rhythm that was slightly off-beat but worked for them. Rebecca became aware of how close they were, of the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress, of the faint scent of leather and sage that clung to him. "Why did you really do this?" she asked quietly. "Please tell me the truth." Isaac's expression grew serious. "I told you the truth. I know what it's like to be humiliated in front of a whole town. 5 years ago, I was set to marry a woman back in Montana. Found her in bed with my brother the night before the wedding. I left that town and never went back. Started drifting, working where I could, never staying anywhere too long." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, and she meant it. "So am I. But I learned something from it. I learned that the worst moments can teach you about yourself if you let them. They can make you bitter or they can make you better." He twirled her gently. "When I heard what happened to you this morning, I saw a chance to maybe be better. To help someone the way I wish someone had helped me. But marriage, that's quite a commitment for a kind gesture." "Maybe I'm tired of drifting," Isaac said. "Maybe I saw a woman with strength in her eyes, standing there refusing to cry even though her world just fell apart, and I thought, that's someone worth knowing, worth standing beside." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes for the first time that day. "I don't know if I'm strong. I feel like I'm barely holding together." "Strength isn't about not falling apart," Isaac said gently. "It's about standing back up after. You're standing, Rebecca. That's what matters." The dance ended and other couples joined them on the floor. Rebecca's parents approached, her mother embracing her tightly. "Are you all right?" her mother whispered. "I think so," Rebecca said. "I know this is strange, Mama, but Isaac seems like a good man." "He'd better be," her father interjected, "because we need to discuss what happens next. Where will you live? How will you support yourselves? These are practical matters that need addressing." Isaac stepped forward. "Sir, I have money saved. Enough to buy a piece of land, start a small ranch. I'm good with horses and cattle. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'll provide for your daughter." "But you just met her," Rebecca's father pressed. "How can you make such promises to a stranger?" "Because I'm a man of my word," Isaac said simply. "When I said those vows today, I meant them. For better or worse, Rebecca is my wife now. I'll honor that commitment." Rebecca's father studied Isaac for a long moment. "There's a property about 3 miles from our ranch, 20 acres with a small house and a barn. The owner died last winter and his widow moved back east to live with her daughter. She's been trying to sell it. I could put you in touch with her." "I'd appreciate that, sir," Isaac said. The reception continued into the evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Rebecca realized with a start that she would be going home with Isaac tonight. To where, she did not know. What would happen between them she could not predict. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac leaned close and said, "I secured a room at the boarding house for tonight. 2 beds. You need not worry about anything happening that you're not ready for." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. We'll take this one day at a time," he said. "No pressure, no expectations. We're in this together and we'll figure it out together." As the evening drew to a close, people began to leave, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Anderson, the proprietor of the boarding house, assured them their room was ready whenever they wished to retire. Finally, Rebecca and Isaac walked together through the darkening streets of Rock Springs toward the boarding house. The temperature had dropped with the sunset, and Rebecca shivered in her thin wedding dress. Without a word, Isaac shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled like him, like the road and leather and something uniquely masculine that was not unpleasant. "Thank you," she said. "You've said that a lot today," Isaac observed. "I suppose I have a lot to be thankful for. If you hadn't walked through those church doors, I don't know what I would have done." "You would have survived," Isaac said with certainty. "You would have held your head high and walked out of there with dignity. Maybe my way was easier, but you didn't need me. You're stronger than you think." They reached the boarding house, and Mrs. Anderson showed them to a corner room on the second floor. True to Isaac's word, it contained 2 single beds on opposite sides of the room, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a small table with 2 chairs. "I'll bring up some hot water for washing," Mrs. Anderson said, eyeing them with curiosity. "And breakfast is at 7 sharp." When she left, an awkward silence filled the room. Rebecca stood near one of the beds, suddenly acutely aware that she was alone in a room with a man who was legally her husband but whom she had only met hours ago. Isaac cleared his throat. "I'll step out while you change. Take your time." He left, closing the door gently behind him. Rebecca sat down on the bed, her legs suddenly weak. What had she done? What were they doing? This was madness. But as she unbuttoned her wedding dress, carefully hanging it in the wardrobe, she realized she did not regret it. Thomas had left her, had chosen a leaner over her, and yes, that hurt. But standing at that altar with Isaac, feeling his steadiness and strength, she had felt something she had never quite felt with Thomas' safety. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. She changed into her nightgown and robe, then called out that Isaac could return. He came in carrying a pitcher of hot water, which he poured into the basin on the washstand. "I'll just wash up quickly, and then let you have some privacy," he said. Rebecca sat at the small table, brushing out her hair while Isaac washed the dust of travel from his face and hands. She found herself watching him in the mirror's reflection, studying this stranger who was now her husband. He moved with an easy confidence, economical in his movements, nothing wasted. When he was done, he changed into sleeping clothes while Rebecca kept her eyes politely averted. Then he sat on his own bed, pulling off his boots. "This is strange, isn't it?" Rebecca said suddenly. Isaac looked up and smiled. "Strange doesn't begin to cover it, but not bad strange, just different." "Tell me about yourself," Rebecca said. "If we're going to be married, I should know more than your name and that you worked on ranches." Isaac leaned back against the wall, stretching his long legs out on the bed. "What do you want to know? Everything, where you grew up, your family, what you like and dislike, your dreams, everything." So Isaac told her. He had grown up in Montana, the second of 4 sons. His father had been a ranch hand who drank too much and died young. His mother had remarried a merchant who moved the family to town, where Isaac had never quite fit in. He preferred the open range to the confines of civilization, preferred the company of horses to most people. He loved the stars, the way they looked so bright out on the prairie. He liked his coffee black and strong, could not stomach eggs fried hard, and had a secret fondness for apple pie. "Your turn," he said when he had talked for nearly an hour. "Tell me about Rebecca Catherine." So she did. She told him about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before she could properly walk, about her love of reading, and how she used to order books from back east and hide them in the barn to read in secret, because her father thought too much book learning made women difficult. She told him about her younger brother who had died of fever when he was 7, about how her parents had never quite been the same after. She told him about Thomas, about how they had courted for 2 years, about how she had thought she loved him but now wondered if she had just loved the idea of him, the security he represented. "You think you'll ever forgive him?" Isaac asked. Rebecca considered this. "I don't know. Right now, I'm too angry, but maybe someday. More than Thomas, I think I need to forgive Alina. She was family. That betrayal cuts deeper. Family can hurt you worse than strangers, Isaac agreed. That's why blood alone doesn't make a bond. Actions do, loyalty does. They talked until late into the night, until Rebecca's eyes grew heavy and her words began to slur with exhaustion. Isaac noticed and stood. We should sleep. Tomorrow we have a lot to figure out. Rebecca climbed into her bed, and Isaac extinguished the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. She could hear him settling into his own bed across the room, the creak of the frame, the rustle of blankets. "Isaac," she said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for today, for everything. You're welcome. Sleep well, Rebecca." She closed her eyes, and despite everything that had happened, despite the strangeness of sleeping in the same room as a man she barely knew, she fell asleep almost immediately, more peaceful than she had been in weeks. The next morning, they woke to bright sunshine streaming through the window. Rebecca dressed behind a privacy screen while Isaac waited in the hallway, and then they went down to breakfast together. Mrs. Anderson served them hot coffee, fresh biscuits, scrambled eggs, and bacon, all while casting curious glances their way. "Will you be staying on with us?" she asked. "Just a few days," Isaac replied, "until we can secure more permanent lodgings." After breakfast, they walked to Rebecca's parents' ranch to retrieve her belongings and discuss the property her father had mentioned. The morning was already growing hot, the August sun beating down on the dusty road. Rebecca's wedding dress had been replaced by a practical calico work dress, her hair braided simply down her back. "Are you nervous?" Isaac asked as they walked, "about seeing my parents a little. They must think I've lost my mind." "Have you?" Rebecca considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe I've finally found it." Her parents were waiting on the porch when they arrived. Her mother embraced her tightly, searching her face for signs of distress. Finding none seemed to ease her worry. "Come inside, both of you," her father said. "We have much to discuss." Over fresh coffee at the kitchen table, plans were made. Rebecca's father had already contacted Mrs. Wheeler, the widow selling the property. She was asking $800 for the 20 acres, the house, the barn, and all the equipment left behind. "It's a fair price," her father said. "The house needs some work, but it's sound. The barn is good. There's a well and a creek running through the property. Good grazing land." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "I have $900 saved. That would leave us $100 to get started to buy supplies and some livestock." "We would help you," Rebecca's mother said quickly. "We could provide some chickens, perhaps a milk cow to start, some basic supplies to get you through the first season." "I appreciate that, madam, but I don't want to take advantage of your generosity," Isaac said. "Your family now," her father said gruffly. "That's what family does. Besides, if you're going to take care of our daughter, we want to see you succeed." Over the next week, things moved quickly. Isaac met with Mrs. Wheeler and purchased the property. Rebecca's parents helped them move in, bringing wagon loads of supplies, furniture, and provisions. The house was small, just 3 rooms, but it was clean and sturdy. Rebecca threw herself into making it a home, scrubbing floors, hanging curtains she sewed from fabric her mother contributed, arranging the simple furniture. Isaac worked from dawn until dark, repairing the barn, mending fences, clearing brush. He purchased 3 horses at auction, 2 mares and a stallion, good, strong animals that could be bred and trained. He bought 6 cattle to start a small herd. Every evening, he came back to the house exhausted and covered in dust, and Rebecca would have dinner waiting, simple fare like stew or beans and cornbread, but hot and filling. They fell into a routine, these 2 strangers learning to live as husband and wife. They still slept in separate beds, Isaac insisting on giving Rebecca time and space. They talked during meals, sharing stories of their days, learning each other's habits and preferences. Rebecca discovered that Isaac woke before dawn without fail, that he hummed while he worked, that he had a gift for working with horses that bordered on magical. He could gentle the wildest animal with patience and quiet words. Isaac learned that Rebecca was fiercely independent, that she could shoot as well as any man, that she had a quick mind for numbers, and kept their accounts with precision. He learned that she sang while she cooked, that she read by lamplight every night before bed, that she had a soft spot for injured animals, and once spent 3 days nursing a wounded rabbit back to health. 2 weeks after their wedding, they were eating dinner when Isaac said, "I think we should talk about us, about this marriage." Rebecca set down her fork, her stomach suddenly tight. "All right. I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give," Isaac said carefully. "We entered this arrangement under unusual circumstances. If you want to maintain separate beds indefinitely, I'll respect that. If you want to pursue an annulment once enough time has passed that the gossip has died down, I'll understand." Rebecca looked at him across the table. In the 2 weeks they had lived together, she had come to know him better than she had ever known Thomas, despite 2 years of courtship. Isaac was honest, hardworking, kind. He treated her with respect, listened when she spoke, valued her opinions. He made her laugh with his dry humor. He made her feel safe. "What if I don't want an annulment?" she said quietly. Isaac's eyes widened slightly. "Then we stay married." "Is that what you want?" He was quiet for a moment. "Rebecca, when I offered to marry you, it was partly to help you and partly to help myself. I was tired of drifting, tired of being alone. These past 2 weeks, living here with you, building something together, it's been the happiest I've been in years. So yes, if you're asking if I want to stay married, the answer is yes. Very much yes." Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. "I worried I was being foolish, that I was developing feelings for you too quickly. But Thomas and I courted for 2 years, and I never felt for him what I feel for you after 2 weeks." "And what do you feel?" Isaac asked, his voice low. "Safe. Valued. Like I'm part of a team rather than just an accessory to someone else's life." She paused. "Like maybe this could become something real." Isaac stood and moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair. He took her hands in his. "It already is real, Rebecca. Maybe it started as an arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. I look forward to coming home to you every evening. I love the way you hum while you cook and the way you scrunch up your nose when you're doing sums. I love how you're not afraid of hard work, how you faced down that rattlesnake in the barn with a shovel like it was nothing." Rebecca laughed. "I was terrified. But you did it anyway, that's courage." He squeezed her hands. "I'm falling in love with you, Rebecca. I think I started falling that first day in the church when you took my hand despite every logical reason not to." Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes, but they were good tears. "I'm falling in love with you too. It terrifies me because it's so fast and so unexpected, but it's real. What I feel for you is real." Isaac reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "May I kiss you? A real kiss this time, not for show." "Yes," Rebecca breathed. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like the brief kiss in the church. This was deep and searching, full of promise and heat. Rebecca's hands came up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her from the chair and into his embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right. I want to court you properly, even though we're already married." "How does one court one's own wife?" Rebecca asked, smiling. "I'll find ways. I'll bring you flowers. Take you on picnics. Write you love letters even though we live in the same house." Rebecca laughed, the sound bright and free. "That sounds perfect." That night, Isaac still slept in his own bed, but he held Rebecca's hand across the space between them until they both drifted off to sleep. True to his word, Isaac courted her. He picked wildflowers and left them on her pillow. He carved her a little wooden bird because she had mentioned loving the meadowlarks that sang each morning. He took her riding to a beautiful spot by the creek where they spread a blanket and ate lunch, talking and laughing under the shade of cottonwood trees. Rebecca courted him too, in her own way. She learned to make apple pie the way he loved it. She mended his shirts with careful stitches and embroidered his initials on the cuffs. She read to him in the evenings from her treasured books, and he listened with genuine interest, asking questions about the stories. 1 month after their wedding, Rebecca moved her belongings into Isaac's room. They made love for the first time on a cool September night, tender and sweet, learning each other in this new way. Afterward, wrapped in Isaac's arms, Rebecca felt truly married for the first time. This was not an arrangement anymore. This was real love, built on friendship and respect and genuine affection. The seasons changed, and their love grew deeper. They worked side by side through the autumn, preparing for winter. Isaac trained the horses and sold 2 for a good profit. The cattle grew fat on the good grazing land. They visited Rebecca's parents every Sunday for dinner, and her father slowly warmed to Isaac, recognizing in him a good man who truly loved his daughter. Winter came, and they spent long evenings by the fire, talking about their dreams for the future. They wanted to expand the ranch to build a reputation for good horses. They wanted children eventually to fill the house with laughter and love. "You ever think about Thomas?" Isaac asked one night as snow fell softly outside. Rebecca considered this. "Sometimes. But not with anger anymore or even sadness. If he hadn't left me, I never would have married you. I would have spent my life with a man who didn't truly love me, never knowing what real love felt like." "Strange how the worst day of your life led to the best thing," Isaac mused. "Not strange," Rebecca said, kissing him softly. "Just life. Just fate." Spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch. The mares both foaled, giving them 2 beautiful colts that Isaac began training from birth. Rebecca discovered she was pregnant in April, and the joy on Isaac's face when she told him made her cry happy tears. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Blessed, grateful, terrified," he admitted with a laugh, "but mostly happy." Rebecca's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to work around the ranch as long as she was able, insisting she was not fragile. Isaac fretted over her constantly, trying to make her rest, bringing her water and snacks, reading every book about childbirth he could get his hands on. "You're going to drive me mad with all this hovering," Rebecca said fondly one day in her 7th month as Isaac tried to convince her not to hang laundry. "I just want to take care of you," he protested. "You do take care of me, but I'm pregnant, not dying. I need to move to work. It makes me feel better." He relented but stayed nearby, watching her with worried eyes that made her love him even more. In late November, as the first serious snow of winter began to fall, Rebecca went into labor. Isaac rode like mad to fetch the midwife while Rebecca's mother stayed with her, coaching her through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Isaac paced outside the bedroom, praying and worrying in equal measure. Finally, as dawn broke on the 2nd day, a baby's cry filled the house. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Jameson, a healthy baby boy." Isaac rushed into the room. Rebecca lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she had never looked more beautiful. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and wailing. "A son," she said, her voice weak but happy. "We have a son, Isaac." He sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at his child with wonder. "He's perfect. You're perfect. You're both perfect. Do you want to hold him?" Rebecca asked. With shaking hands, Isaac took his son into his arms. The baby quieted immediately, blinking up at his father with unfocused blue eyes. "Hello there, little one," Isaac said softly. "I'm your papa, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are loved." They named him Henry after Isaac's grandfather. Henry James Jameson, born on November 23, 1879, during the first snow of winter. The house that had once seemed quiet now rang with baby sounds, cries and coos and gurgles. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, rocking Henry to sleep while humming soft lullabies. Rebecca watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. This man who had started as a stranger, who had offered his hand when she was at her lowest, who had courted her and married her and built a life with her, was now the father of her child. It seemed impossible that just a year and a half ago she had been standing at an altar waiting for a different man. "You ever regret it?" she asked Isaac one night as they lay in bed, Henry sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them. "Marrying me that day, taking on all of this." Isaac rolled over to face her, his hand coming up to stroke her cheek. "Not for one single second. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You and Henry, you're my whole world. You saved me that day," Rebecca said. "When you walked through those church doors, you saved me from a lifetime of shame and whispers." "No," Isaac said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you an option. You were brave enough to take it. You were strong enough to make this work. You saved yourself, Rebecca. Don't ever forget that." She kissed him then, long and deep, grateful beyond words for this life they had built together. The years passed quickly, measured in seasons and milestones. Henry grew from an infant to a toddler, taking his first steps in the kitchen while Rebecca cheered and Isaac caught it all with proud tears in his eyes. The ranch prospered. Isaac's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and people came from all over Wyoming territory to buy his animals. When Henry was 2, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the summer of 1882, she delivered a daughter they named Rose, after the wildflowers that grew by the creek where Isaac had first told Rebecca he loved her. Rose was a quiet baby with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. Henry adored his baby sister, constantly trying to help care for her, bringing her toys and singing to her in his off-key toddler voice. Rebecca's parents were frequent visitors, doting grandparents who spoiled the children terribly. Her father, who had been so skeptical of Isaac at first, now considered him the son he had lost. They worked together often, combining their herds, helping each other through hard times. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that tested them, harsh winters that they barely survived, illnesses that scared them. But through it all, Isaac and Rebecca faced every challenge together, their love growing stronger with each trial overcome. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Henry and Rose play in the yard, Henry now 6 and Rose 4, Rebecca leaned against Isaac's shoulder. "Do you remember that day?" she asked. "Our wedding day." "Every detail," Isaac replied. "You standing at that altar looking like your world had ended. The way your hand trembled when you took mine. The expression on the Reverend's face when I offered to marry you." Rebecca laughed. "He looked like he had swallowed a frog. Everyone did." Do you ever wonder what happened to Thomas and Alina? Rebecca shook her head. Not really. I heard they made it to California, that he works in a general store. I hope they are happy in whatever way they can be, but I don't think about them anymore. Good, Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. You deserve to be free of that pain. I am free, Rebecca said. Because of you, because you showed me what real love looks like, partnership, respect, choosing each other every single day. Isaac pulled her closer. You showed me the same thing. Before you, I was just drifting, running from pain. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. We gave each other those things, Rebecca corrected. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant colors. This was happiness, Rebecca thought. Not the fairy tale she had imagined as a girl, not the safe, predictable life she had thought she wanted with Thomas. This was something better, real and hard-won and precious, because they had built it together from nothing. Years continued to pass. Henry grew tall and strong like his father, with the same gift for working with horses. Rose became a voracious reader like her mother, always with her nose in a book. In 1885, Rebecca gave birth to twins. Boys they named William and Thomas, the latter not after her former intended, but after Isaac's grandfather on his mother's side. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Isaac added 2 more rooms, and the sound of children's laughter filled every corner. The ranch continued to prosper. They purchased more land, expanded their herds, built a reputation as one of the best horse breeding operations in Wyoming. Rebecca's parents aged gracefully, her father finally retiring and turning his ranch over to a foreman while he spent his days with his grandchildren. Her mother taught Rose to sew and cook, passing down family recipes and stories. Isaac and Rebecca themselves grew older, silver threading through their hair, lines appearing at the corners of their eyes. But their love never aged. If anything, it grew richer, deeper, more comfortable. They knew each other's thoughts with a glance, could communicate with a look across a crowded room. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Rebecca back to Rock Springs, to the church where they had married. It looked the same, though a new reverend now presided there. They stood together at the altar, holding hands. I want to renew our vows, Isaac said. I want to stand here and make those promises again, but this time meaning them in a way I couldn't have possibly understood back then. This time knowing exactly what I'm promising and to whom. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I would like that. They spoke the words to each other, no reverend needed. I, Isaac, take you, Rebecca, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. I, Rebecca, take you, Isaac, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. They kissed there at the altar, and it felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. The beginning of the next chapter of their lives together, the ending of any doubt or uncertainty that had once existed. When they left the church, Rebecca looked back one more time. Thank you, she whispered to the empty building, to the memory of that terrified girl who had stood there alone, to the stranger who had walked through the doors and changed everything. More years passed. Henry married at 20, bringing home a sweet girl named Lucy who Rebecca welcomed as a daughter. They built a house on the edge of the property and started their own family. Rose followed her heart east to become a teacher, writing letters home filled with stories of her students and her adventures. The twins, inseparable as always, decided to try their luck in Montana, buying land there to start their own ranch. Isaac and Rebekah found themselves alone again, their children grown and gone, the house suddenly quiet. But it was a good quiet, peaceful rather than empty. They had each other, and that had always been enough. On a warm summer evening in 1901, 23 years after their unlikely wedding, Isaac and Rebekah sat on their porch watching another sunset. Isaac's hair was now completely silver, his hands gnarled with arthritis. Rebekah moved slower than she once had, her joints stiff with age, but they still held hands, still found joy in each other's company. "We did all right, didn't we?" Isaac said, his voice rougher than it had been in his youth. "We did better than all right," Rebekah replied. "We built a good life. Raised good children, loved each other well. If you could go back to that day, knowing everything that would happen, would you still take my hand?" Rebekah turned to look at him, this man who had been her husband for more than 2 decades, who had given her children and a home and a love beyond measure. In a heartbeat, every time, no hesitation. Isaac smiled, the same smile that had reassured her on their wedding day. "Good. Because I'd offer it every time. In every lifetime, in every possible world, I would walk through those church doors and offer you my hand." "We were lucky," Rebekah said. "We were brave," Isaac corrected. "You were brave enough to take a chance on a stranger. I was brave enough to offer. And together, we were brave enough to build something real from that moment of courage." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together in the peaceful silence of a love well lived. The ranch would continue. Henry and his family would see to that. The legacy they had built would endure. But more than land or horses or wealth, what Isaac and Rebekah had built was a partnership based on trust and respect and genuine love. That night as they lay in bed, Rebekah nestled into Isaac's embrace the way she had for thousands of nights before. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always have, always will." They fell asleep that way, together as they had been for 23 years, as they would be for all the years remaining to them. Two people who had started as strangers, brought together by circumstance and courage, who had chosen each other every day since that moment in the church when a jilted bride took the hand of a stranger cowboy, and found, against all odds, true love. The story of Rebekah and Isaac became legend in Rock Springs, told and retold through the generations. The stranger who rode into town and married the abandoned bride. The woman brave enough to take a chance on love when her world fell apart. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would hear the tale and marvel at the courage it took, at the love that grew from such unlikely beginnings. But for Isaac and Rebekah themselves, it was simply their life. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Built on a foundation of mutual respect, sustained by genuine affection, enriched by shared joys and sorrows. They had taken the worst day of Rebekah's life and transformed it into the first day of their best lives. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for, to find someone to stand beside through all of life's trials, to build something meaningful together, to love and be loved in return. Isaac and Rebekah had found that and more. They had found their home in each other, and that home had sustained them through everything life could throw at them. As the years continued to pass, as their children brought more grandchildren into the world, as the new century unfolded with all its changes and challenges, Isaac and Rebekah remained constant. Their love was the bedrock upon which their family was built, the example their children tried to emulate in their own marriages. When Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1908 at the age of 62, Rebekah was beside him, holding his hand as she had held it on their wedding day 30 years before. She mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had lived well together. They had loved well together. And that was everything. Rebecca lived another 7 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories of the ranch's early days, of the stranger cowboy who had saved her, and whom she had saved in return. She passed away in her sleep on a warm August night in 1915, almost exactly 37 years after that fateful wedding day. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the wide Wyoming sky they had both loved. Their headstones were simple. Isaac James Jameson, beloved husband and father. Rebecca Catherine Jameson, beloved wife and mother. But those who knew their story knew the truth of what those stones represented: two people who had taken a chance on each other when the world said they were crazy, who had built a love story for the ages from the ashes of heartbreak and the courage of a single moment. Henry and his family maintained the ranch, passing it down through the generations. Rose's children became teachers and doctors and lawyers, spreading education and healing through the territory. The twins' descendants still ran ranches in Montana, carrying on the family tradition. But the heart of the legacy was always the story, the reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are simply setups for the best. That courage and kindness can change everything. That love can bloom in the most unexpected places if we are brave enough to nurture it. The church in Rock Springs still stood a century later, though much changed. But old-timers still told the story of the wedding that almost did not happen, of the bride abandoned and the stranger who stepped forward, of a love that defied convention and expectation to become something extraordinary. It was a story about taking chances, about the courage to say yes even when logic said no, about building something real from nothing but hope and determination. It was a story about two people who should have been strangers but who instead became partners, lovers, best friends. It was, in the end, a love story, the kind that reminded people that fairy tales could happen, just not always in the ways we expected. Sometimes the prince was not the one we had been waiting for, but the stranger who walked through the door at exactly the right moment. Sometimes happily ever after was not about perfection, but about two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through all of life's joys and sorrows. Rebecca and Isaac's story became a reminder that love was not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, about extending a hand when someone needed it, about being brave enough to accept help when it was offered. It was about building trust slowly, about learning to love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the whole complicated, beautiful person they were. Their descendants carried this lesson forward, generation after generation. They told their children about great-great-grandma Rebecca, who was left at the altar, and great-great-grandpa Isaac, who offered his hand. They told about the courage it took to marry a stranger, the work it took to build a marriage, the love that sustained them through 3 decades of life together. The ranch itself stood as a monument to their love, the land they had worked together, the home they had built with their own hands, the legacy they had created not through grand ambition, but through daily commitment to each other and to the life they were building. In Rock Springs, where it all began, the story of the abandoned bride and the stranger cowboy became part of the town's history, told to visitors and newcomers as an example of the courage and resilience of the people who had built the West. It became a story parents told their children about true love, about not giving up when life knocks you down, about being open to unexpected blessings. Because that was what Isaac had been for Rebecca, and what Rebecca had been for Isaac, an unexpected blessing. A gift wrapped in the most unlikely package, offered at the darkest moment, accepted with trembling courage that grew into unshakable certainty. Their love story was not about love at first sight. It was about something deeper and more meaningful, love built through daily choice, through showing up for each other, through facing life's challenges as a team. It was about two people who met as strangers and became family, who took a marriage of convenience and transformed it into a partnership of genuine affection and respect. The wildflowers that grew by the creek where Isaac first told Rebekah he loved her still bloomed every summer, descendants of the flowers he had picked for her all those years ago. The cottonwood trees where they had picnicked grew tall and strong. The land they had worked together continued to sustain their descendants. But more than any physical legacy, what Isaac and Rebekah left behind was a story of hope. Hope that the worst moments are not endings but beginnings. Hope that courage can change everything. Hope that love, real love, is possible even in the most unexpected circumstances. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that life rarely goes according to plan, but sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be. Rebekah had planned to marry Thomas, had imagined a specific future. When that plan fell apart, she could have seen it as the end of her story. Instead, she saw it as a chance to write a new chapter, one she could never have imagined but which turned out to be more beautiful than anything she had dreamed. Isaac had been drifting for years, running from his pain, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Walking into that church and offering his hand to Rebekah had been the moment he stopped running, the moment he chose to stand still and build something lasting. Together, they had created a love story that would outlast them both, that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. They had proven that love was not about perfect circumstances, but about imperfect people choosing to build something together. They had shown that the best love stories were not the ones that started easily, but the ones that were fought for, worked for, chosen again and again. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, as the world changed in ways Isaac and Rebekah could never have imagined, their story remained constant, a reminder of timeless truths about love, courage, and the power of human connection. The ranch had been designated a historical site, preserved for future generations to visit and learn about the early days of Wyoming territory. Tourists walked through the house where Isaac and Rebekah had raised their children, saw the barn Isaac had repaired with his own hands, stood by the creek where they had fallen in love. But more than the physical spaces, what people came to see was the legacy of love. They came to hear the story of the woman who was brave enough to take a stranger's hand, and the man who was brave enough to offer it. They came to remember that love could bloom anywhere, that courage could change everything, that the worst days could become the best if we were willing to take a chance. And so the story lived on, passed down through the years, a testament to Rebekah and Isaac, to their courage and their love, to the life they built together from that single moment of bravery in a small church in Rock Springs, Wyoming, on a hot August day in 1878 when a jilted bride took the hand of a stranger cowboy and found her happily ever after.